think we're live. Yes. Hello, I'm Amanda from Great British Chefs, and welcome to our Food Trends webinar. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to be sharing with you the insights from our latest national survey, where we'll explore the values, the attitudes, and the habits of the modern day foodie, as well as the key trends that are happening across Britain's changing culinary landscape. I'm delighted today to be joined by Chef Chantal Nicholson, who's going to be sharing her views with some of the trends that we're seeing. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Chantal is a multi-award-winning chef patron at Treadwell's, Group Operations Director at Marcus Waring Restaurant Group, and we're here today at Treadwell, so thanks for having us. Author of several cookbooks, including your solo vegan-based cookbook, Planted. You're also a hugely influential role in the world of chefs, involved in causes around sustainability, supporting women in the industry, and also working alongside brands and numerous charities. So it's going to be great to get Chantal's view on some of the topics we'll cover today. Just a bit of sort of housekeeping for those that have joined. We're going to be inviting you to submit your questions, so we'll be doing a Q&A at the end. And the full white paper will be available to download after the session. So without further ado, we'll crack on. Firstly, I wanted to share a bit of background about Great British Chefs, as I'm mindful not everyone will know who we are. We work with over 150 of the finest chefs and food contributors in the UK to deliver the most premium food content online. To date, we've published over 4,500 recipes, and we have a hugely loyal and engaged audience. No one is more committed to inspiring foodies and helping brands engage them than us. In terms of numbers, we're one of the fastest growing food sites in the UK, reaching 13.8 million unique users over the last 12 months, delivering almost 50 million page views. We continue to engage the community through initiatives like our Cookbook Club on Facebook, and we have a growing fan base of 1.3 million on social media. We pride ourselves on having an unparalleled understanding of Britain's 13 million foodies. We started our research in 2017 to truly understand who the foodie was and what drove them. Since then, we've completed over 40,000 surveys, answering 2 million questions, and we've published 8 industry-leading white papers exploring those key themes. These white papers are available to download on our site, so if you would like more information, please go on and have a look. We use the data to help shape our own content and business strategy, and we use it to help our key brand partners to ensure that we're engaging our audience with the right messages and delivering real impact for brands. So this latest research paper, we ran the survey back in July 2019. It was completed by 4,000 people, a nationally representative sample, sourced by Dynata, and also 8,000 Great British Chefs respondents. So the key theme for today's session is really to explore this rich and complex relationship of the modern day foodie and the trends that we're seeing impacting the food scene. And in summary, I think to love food is becoming less simple. In the past, it was okay to just love cooking and enjoy eating without worrying about environmental implications and health concerns. But now people are increasingly questioning the ethics and that lie behind food production, and they're making more health conscious decisions. And today we're going to cover 5 main themes. First, who is the modern day foodie? Second, the evolving world of plant-based eating. Third, the war on waste. Fourth is the impact of quality, price and innovation on brand purchasing. And finally, we explore exactly what people are cooking in their kitchens at home. So let's get started with our first trend, which is all around exploring the modern day foodie. So we've segmented the British consumer into 3 segments based on how strongly they agree with sort of a number of key food related statements. If you have a look at our white paper, you can see a lot more details about how we've segmented these audience. But essentially, we see around 13 million foodies in the UK, 30% of the UK population. As we've seen in past research, while the largest concentration of foodies are living in London and southern England, actually the reality is that 11 million foodies live outside London and 8.5 million live outside London and the south. So they're a truly sort of national cohort of people. When we dive a little deeper, we see that some of the key statements that are defining a foodie are becoming kind of more and more pronounced. Foodies are talking more about food than they did 3 years ago, increasing from 71% to 84% in the last 2 years. They feel a lot happier and more confident about associating themselves with the label of a foodie, with 73% now claiming this title, and they believe that their friends increasingly expect them to be in the know, a 25% increase since 2017. So in a world dominated by social media and niche communities, people are increasingly defining themselves in relation to their passions and values, and foodies are no different. What's interesting is that despite the fact that the UK is enjoying consuming more food TV than ever before and more food content, this is not necessarily translating into a nation that feels confident in their cooking abilities. While the younger demographics are more confident in the kitchen versus older consumers, there's been a marked decline in the number of Brits who are considering their skills to be above average, and an increase in those who actually think they're just average. So it's possible that this sort of increasing expanse of food TV and content and social media is fueling a bigger sort of anxiety about people's confidence in the kitchen, which we found really quite interesting. And I think at this point I want to just sort of throw this open for some debate with Chantal, because you've taught lots of people how to cook over the years, and we've worked together with Great British Chefs on a number of cook schools and so on. What do you think makes people feel anxious in the kitchen, and what can we as brands and chefs do to instill more confidence with people cooking?
I think cooking is something that needs to be enjoyed for what it is, and it is, whilst it's a functional thing at home, and so quite often there's time pressures, it's something that also, it's not rocket science in a way. And yes, I can say that because I'm a chef, but at the end of the day it doesn't take much to make something taste really delicious, and also that it's nutritious as well. So I think a simplification of language, sometimes of recipes, nothing that's too complex. I think sometimes names can be confusing and can be actually a little bit, people can be nervous to even purchase certain ingredients that they don't know how to pronounce. So they have to ask for them and they don't know how to pronounce it, they just won't buy them.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it's about just bringing that back to basics a little, and understanding that really great produce can taste good without doing a huge amount to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So simplifying things is key.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we've done a lot together in teaching children how to cook and cooking with kids.
Absolutely.
Which I think can be a wonderful way to bring to life the simplicity and the joy of cooking in the kitchen.
Yeah, I think the two things that we've done recently together with the cook schools, one was a homemade pizza where we actually made the pizza dough, and the other one was the gnocchi. And again, I think just showing how easy it is to take just a few ingredients to make something that A, they normally buy, or B, looks a bit more complicated than it actually is, and just that whole enjoyment for them to actually start with a bowl of flour, some yeast, some water, and to end up with a pizza is really lovely to watch as well.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll move on to our next trend, which is all around plant-based eating. Something you'll be very familiar with, Chantal. We've been watching this, movement unfold over the years, and it's now the case that more than half of the UK are engaging with this trend on some level. While 6% of the UK identify as either strictly vegan, 1%, or strictly vegetarian at 5%, what we're seeing is a significantly larger number who are engaging with this movement on a part-time basis, the sort of rise of the flexitarian, and we see 40% of the population claiming to do so. For us, we see this as a real volume opportunity for brands, to start to engage this group who are possibly at the start of their journey and don't necessarily have sort of established habits yet. But I think it's also worth pointing out that 44% of the UK are not engaging with this trend at all. So they're potentially a valuable group to convert from a marketing and an NPD perspective. And considering the rise in vegetarian and vegan eating, it's hardly surprising to see that 44% of the UK claim to be eating more vegetables than they were 12 months ago. Fish is also benefiting from the move towards a less meat-centric diet, as are meat-free alternatives like veggie burgers, tofu, particularly amongst foodies. And I think, we're seeing in the UK now, a kind of rapid increase in the number of vegan-based NPD launches that are coming to market. I think recently in a Mintel study, they sort of quoted 1 in 5 new launches now in the food world are plant-based. So as a result of this, we're also seeing a significant number of people eating less processed meats and categories like bacon and sausages, as well as beef, which we delve into much more detail in the white paper, are sort of taking a hit as a result. So it's clear, I think, people are adopting a much more mindful approach to food and plant-based eating. And it's becoming more and more mainstream. Now, Chantal, you set up Treadwell's 5 years ago. It's a restaurant that has always celebrated veg as part of the menu, and you've published your own vegan cookbook called Planted. So you clearly saw this trend coming a long time ago, and you've embraced it. How do you see this space evolving in the future?
I think from the beginning perspective of it, I didn't, see it as a trend. In hindsight, even looking back, because for me it was about being inclusive to people that wanted to eat here. I wanted everybody to feel comfortable and confident eating here, depending on what their dietary requirements were, if they had any allergens, those sorts of things. So I saw it as something to embrace, and I really enjoyed the challenge of actually having to create delicious food, but removing kind of half of the things that I'd been taught with originally or experienced in my cooking career. And I think from that perspective it was more, okay, once you kind of get into the enjoyment of it, it becomes something to embrace. And I think that in terms of where it's going, I think that it's quite clear that there's science-based fact that we need to eat more vegetables and less meat. So I think the more we can actually embrace that, and instead of kind of grappling with it and kind of seeing it as a negative, I think it's something that's really positive. And vegetables are delicious, and we can make them taste really delicious. But again, it doesn't take much education, but I think there still needs to be some as to how to get that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's your hero veg at the moment? What are you absolutely loving and is sort of delighting customers that are coming through the door?
It's like choosing your own child, choosing your favourite child. It's quite a hard one to do. Obviously, the time of year we're in, sweet corn is probably one of my favourites at the moment. So we start off our plant-based tasting menu, which is our 5-course plant-based tasting menu called our Veg Wells menu. So that's starting off with a little sweet corn tortellini with a sweet corn velouté. So that's probably at this time of year, but I'm really looking forward to all the kind of celeriac, juicy artichokes, cavolo nero, parsnips, sprouts and pears and quince that are probably not too far away.
Yeah, well, I'll be excited to see some of the recipes that we'll create with you to celebrate those veg.
Yes.
Our next section explores the war on waste, and there's been much discussion about the impact of Blue Planet 2 and Sir David Attenborough's role in encouraging people to join the war on plastic. In the last year, the number of Brits who claim to strongly agree that they're focused on reducing their plastic waste has increased from 34 to 37%. But the greatest increase is amongst our committed foodies, not necessarily younger audience as one might expect. If you look at the number of Brits who agree with this statement, the number increases even further. So nationally to 74%, and committed foodies 91%. So that is people answering strongly agree or slightly agree. So, you know, those statistics imply that the Blue Planet message has absolutely landed and has a significant impact on people's perceptions of plastic. As a result of this, foodies are now actively avoiding products with excess packaging and those that they perceive to be wasteful. It's now the case that 68% of committed foodies strongly agree that they're avoiding products with excess packaging, and only 70% of them disagree with this statement. We've seen a number of companies recently making bold steps to address their environmental impact, and it seems that consumers and the press are taking note. For change to be seen, however, it's vital that brands have a coherent story that they communicate in a compelling way to ensure to sort of cut through to consumers. So, Chantal, I think we can all recognise the importance of addressing some of these issues head on, and there's clearly a growing responsibility for both businesses and brands to instigate this change. As an influential figure in the chef world, what are you doing across your restaurant group, and what can brands learn around how to sort of tackle some of these issues?
I think that the packaging thing is probably the one that's the hardest to control, and I think we've had this conversation before about waste in terms of food waste, that actually restaurants and restaurant kitchens are actually very good at minimising food waste, because if you're not, then your margins aren't going to be where they need to be, and you're not going to be in business that long. So I think there's probably a lot of things that we do as chefs that we don't even necessarily realise that we use the whole vegetable, we use the whole of everything. Even if it's to make our food, it's still a way of utilising it. And I think sometimes it's just getting into that mode of thought as well, that sometimes at home you don't necessarily think, oh well, I'll just throw that in the bin because I don't have a use for it. I think that from a commercial perspective, I think use by and best before dates are actually more of an issue. They actually bring about probably more waste than a lot of things. Yeah. Because, you know, for me, it's as a chef, I'll smell and I'll taste it.
Absolutely.
And it's fine. I'll use it, you know, at home. So I think it's that sort of mentality that also needs to be communicated and changed. And in terms of, as I said, packaging is the hardest one to control, but I think it's about, you know, sourcing. We do have ability to source different products from different suppliers, so it's about making sure that our message is also out there for our suppliers, that, you know, we don't want all that plastic on it. We don't want one thing delivered in a massive box. We don't want, you know, things that we can't recycle because actually we don't have the ability to, yet they may do. So I think it's all about a level of consciousness about it all. I think it's always the first step, and just being aware of what you're doing, and if there is an alternative, great. If there's not, then maybe it's about searching for one, but I don't think it's about, I think sometimes we beat ourselves up a bit too about it. So I think it's about, you know, every little bit that you can do does help. If it's not buying that, you know, plastic water bottle, if it's not buying that takeaway coffee cup, if it's using things that are very easy, quick wins, I think that's really important to start being conscious about.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just those small steps that will lead to,
and they will
quite
eventually,
a sea
if everybody
change.
starts doing the small steps, it will make an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Our next section delves into what categories and products people are purchasing. And over the last 2 years, there's been a number of food scandals and widespread debate about food imports, topics like chlorinated chicken. And it's clear that from recent research that Brits are increasingly seeking out quality products, even if they cost a little bit extra. Accelerating this trend are committed foodies, who are 76% 76% of them strongly agree that they're prepared to pay a bit extra for quality, which is an increase of 16% since 2017. In addition, when looking at the purchasing behaviour of committed foodies, it's clear that they also buy branded products more often than non-foodies, often by 20% more. However, in many categories, it's still not the case. It's the case that on average, only 50% of foodies will buy a branded offering. So while there's a significant over-index, there's still a large upside for growth for brands. And as part of this survey, we wanted to understand the uptake of sort of some of these new product developments in market. And we touched upon earlier the sort of significant number of vegan-based launches over the last 12 months. In this research, we shared a list of 12 new food and drinks products and brands that have been launched in the UK over the last 12 months. Despite the fact that products span different categories such as ice cream, bread, dairy, cheese, coffee, an underlying trend emerged. And I think given foodies' nature to be early adopters of trends, it's unsurprising that our committed foodie audience are the ones that are most interested in buying new products and are purchasing them at a far higher rate than any other segments in the UK, making them a highly valuable audience to target with any new product development innovations. I think it feels like there's a huge amount of innovation happening in the food world at the moment, and a growing number of different products sort of appearing on our supermarket shelves. I was interested to understand what innovations you may have seen recently that you think are really addressing kind of today's consumers' needs.
I think coming back to the packaging question, I think things like water in cans or water in cartons is great to see. And a couple of festivals I was demonstrating at this year in kind of all plastic-free zones, which was really great to see, and I think that's a really important road to go down. In terms of food, I think there's just so much out there right now. Sometimes it's a bit hard to work through the noise, and then sometimes you've got kind of really, I guess, tried and tested brands that have been there for a long time but constantly innovating as well. And if you look at, I guess, meat-free or that side of it, I think if you look at the ones that have been kind of in the game, so to speak, for the longest, such as corn, I think that's something that has stood the test of time, and it's something that is stuck true to what it is, and it hasn't kind of deviated from that. And the way it's made is fascinating, and it's not, you know, a product that contains soy or anything like that. So I think there's a lot of there's a lot of chatter and a lot happening, but I think gradually some of those things will start to fall off. Yeah. And I think just embracing what we do, what we've always had, and the things that we can, you know, buy quite easily on a regular basis, the British things, which probably we're going to need to support a bit more as well in the near future.
Yes, indeed. And we've done a lot of research in past white papers about the importance of provenance, and, you know, I think we're seeing that trend increase more and more. But I think, you know, thinking about meat-free brands like Quorn, for example, it feels like there's a big education job to do in terms of, you know, what these products are made of and how they're done. Because as you say, you know, it's fascinating, and actually, you know, they're doing some incredible things. So I think that people just don't necessarily understand a lot of what goes on.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Our final section now looks at the changing culinary trends taking place in our kitchens at home. So what are people actually cooking in their kitchens? Over the last 18 months, the dishes cooked at home by Brits have become more and more international, and we're embracing a variety of different cuisines. As a result, less than 1 in 5 Brits now claim that over 90% of their food is British. Conversely, 1 in 3 Brits claim that less than 50% of their food is British. So interestingly, this trend is not across. This trend is across the board. It's not just driven purely by foodies. So as a nation, we've sort of truly embraced everything from pizza to tacos to curry, and we're, truly a sort of international. We have an international culinary outlook, even if not all of the dishes are kind of being cooked at home from scratch. But interestingly, when we sort of delved into other habits in the kind of kitchens at home of our audience, we discovered that 2/3 of the UK haven't baked a cake in the last 12 months, which I was astonished by. And the sort of bake-off buzz that we're in, that I found, quite amazing. But, thinking about the sort of explosion of international cuisines and the sort of, globalization of food, I was fascinated to know from you, what cuisines are you most inspired by at the moment, and what do you think people should be cooking more of at home?
I think there's a huge amount of cuisines that, I've never even tried, and I think I love just finding new ingredients or new recipes based on, even provincial cuisines from all around Asia. I think for me, Asia's always been the one that I probably have more affinity with, being from New Zealand as well. And if I had to kind of really drill down, I'd say probably Vietnamese has always been one of my favourites, just because of the freshness of the flavours and the differing combinations. And I think, interestingly, with some of the cuisines as well, and the more provincial ones, I really like the fact that meat's more used as a seasoning as opposed to being the main kind of part of it. There's lots of veg and it's part of the seasoning, or in some obviously Indian cuisines where it is all vegetarian and the flavour is just insane. It's
very
delicious.
Much, and it's interesting to see the different uses of veg as well, from fermentation and pickling and raw. So it's certainly embracing a lot more of that sort of mindful approach that we talked about earlier.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So that brings us to the end of the sort of 5 key themes that we wanted to touch upon today. Now that is very much a kind of whistle-stop tour of the insights and the data that we have here at Great British Chefs, and I hope you found it kind of interesting and useful. It's worth noting that for brands and brand partners that we work with, we can provide much greater and much more in-depth segmentation into specific brand challenges or category sort of areas that you want to delve deeper into. As I said earlier, the white paper will be available to download at the end of this session. But as we've been chatting, many of you have been emailing in with your questions, so thank you very much for those. I don't think we're going to have time to get through all of them, but we'll try and get through some of them now. And for those that we can't get back to, we'll email you back with some answers. So the first question we have here is, do you have any insight into how the vegan and vegetarian trends and the broader health debates are impacting on alcohol consumption? Now, we've looked at alcohol extensively in some of our white papers in the past, and it's clear that alcohol consumption is definitely on the decline, and I think part of generally a more mindful approach to drinking, people are adopting different behaviours. What's interesting, I think, from our perspective, and Chantal, it'd be great to get your thoughts on this, is just the rise in sort of non-alcohol products like seed lip, non-alcoholic cocktails. It feels to us like there's a great opportunity to create more content and educate people more around cocktails and creativity with drinks. And I think there's lots of opportunities for brands who potentially want to sort of play in that space. How are you guys sort of adopting the sort of alcohol-free trends in your restaurants? Do you do a lot to sort of cater for them in that space?
I think given we've had kind of obviously our bar at the Gilbert Scott and the bar here at Treadwell's, we've always been conscious of having some great non-alcoholic cocktails on there, but ones I think quite often with cocktails in general, they can be too sweet. So I think sometimes it's about looking at how that all works. If someone's not drinking, it could be for health reasons, it could be because they want to cut down on their consumption. So if you're going to then load something with sugar, it kind of defeats the purpose. I think kombucha is having a huge kind of moment, which I think is great, because obviously in terms of the health benefits, when it's made, obviously the sugar's eaten by itself in a way, so the actual end result is something that's really, really good for you as well, and it's also really delicious. So I think it's about, again, being a bit more conscious about what is on offer, and it's not kind of an afterthought. I think the same with plant-based options. Sometimes for chefs it's an afterthought, whereas I think you need to actually give it as much kind of effort and time and credit as you do to everything else. So again, with the non-alcoholic or the alcohol-free offer, it needs to be able to stand up to what else is on offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when thinking back to some of the research we've done, people still like to have a drink, and foodies in particular, because they're passionate about food. But I think, they're also equally excited about, being creative in other areas. And, if, midweek maybe is, sort of different drivers to your kind of drinking consumption.
Indeed.
Fantastic. The next question we have here is around sort of fish and veg brands. So do you think there are opportunities for vegetable producers to take advantage of the trends that we've outlined? I think for me, yes, absolutely. I think foodies are more and more interested in produce, where it comes from, the provenance, the sort of sustainability of how it's been made. And, I feel that given 44% of the UK are trying to eat more veg, clearly there's an opportunity here, and it's about demonstrating the sort of creativity that you can have with those vegetables. And I think, from a fish industry perspective, we've done a lot of work with Norwegian seafood, again, just trying to demonstrate, the sort of provenance of fish and the sustainability that can sort of come through. What's your, take on this, Chantal? Do you think there's an opportunity for brands in sort of veg and fish space to benefit from this?
I think it's an interesting one, because I think if you think of brands, if you think of a cauliflower brand, there isn't one. It's from a farm. So I think in terms of the branding exercise, it's, from my perspective, it's actually the consumers being able to embrace more. And I think actually it doesn't always translate to the amount of effort and cost and everything else that goes into growing that cauliflower, for instance, that it's then realised through the consumer. So I think actually a bit more appreciation as to how that got there is what's needed to be able to really give it a boost. I think there are some amazing, Hold Me Dods who have the grains. They're incredible. I've never seen how a lentil has grown. So for them to actually kind of show that on their social media is fascinating and really educational. I think a bit more of that is extremely useful. But again, it's got to be embraced by the consumer. So I think it's almost the consumers need to be a bit more open to it before the brands can actually start to actually make any impact. Yeah, absolutely.
It's an education piece, but also it's a sort of a whole category piece, isn't it? And we've worked with a number of brands in this space, or kind of categories, from piccolo tomatoes to Irish beef and sort of potatoes, and tender stem broccoli, for example. And I think it's definitely an education piece, but also sort of thinking about the broader category and how it can grow.
Absolutely.
Great. I think we've got time for one more question, which is around food boxes, and thinking of the likes of Gusto and HelloFresh. There seem to be an awful lot of food boxes sort of dominating the landscape, certainly dominating my social media feed. Do we have any insight into how meal kits are being impacted by attitudes towards plastic and how people are using them? Now, I know in our previous white paper we delved quite a lot into the sort of take up of food delivery boxes, And the reality, it's still quite a small percentage of people that are actually sort of adopting these kits, and I think the number was about 5% nationally last time when we looked, which, you know, it'd be interesting to see how that's evolved, but it feels like it's still relatively small. But I think from my perspective, you know, and Chantal, it'd be great to get your views on this. You know, they're certainly doing a fantastic job at addressing the food waste issue, but from a plastics perception, you know, I don't know, I have mixed views on, you know, who's doing well and who's, it feels like there's an opportunity to do more to tackle the plastic and the packaging side of things, but it's certainly ticking a box from sort of addressing food waste as an issue.
I think it's definitely addressing the food waste issue, because you only get what you need to use for that particular meal. I think also it's giving people a bit of confidence, as we spoke about in the beginning, that actually you've got all the ingredients there. They may not have purchased that for themselves, but now they can try it in this recipe and see how it works. So I think from a confidence perspective, it's great. From a convenience perspective, it is great. I think that the packaging thing is one that really does need to be addressed, and that's not just about plastic. I think obviously there's a lot of cardboard use. It's where does that go to? So I think on the whole, it probably needs a bit of kind of innovation in that perspective, but I'm certain that it will come probably, hopefully quite quickly.
Absolutely, and a great opportunity for those that can nail that to really cut through and have an impact with consumers. Fantastic. I think that's all we've got time for today, but thank you very much for joining us. As I said, the white paper is available to download, as well as all of our other white papers. A big thanks to Chantal for joining us today and sharing some of her thoughts and insights into what's happening. Have a good day, and thanks again.